Rosa Jenkins arrived at the sleek office tower before the sun climbed above the horizon. She crossed the empty plaza where the light from street lamps still glowed on the smooth stone. In her plain uniform and sturdy shoes, she moved with quiet purpose. In one hand, she carried a mop bucket, and in the other, a stack of cleaning cloths. The tower stood tall and proud, its windows reflecting the pale sky. Inside, the polished marble floor gleamed under the bright ceiling lights. By the time most people reached the front doors, she had already swept several hallways and wiped down dozens of handrails. The janitor's closet was small, but well-stocked. Rosa stored her supplies on neat shelves: extra mop heads, dusters, cleaning solution, and paper towels. She checked her watch. There was still time before the elevators started their busy runs. She filled her bucket with warm soapy water, tightened her gloves, and stepped into the corridor that led to the lower floors. Soft echoes followed her steps as she worked, but she did not mind. She liked the quiet before the day began in earnest. Rosa loved her work for reasons many would not guess. While she cleaned offices and hallways, her mind traveled elsewhere. She listened to podcasts about engines and repairs through an earpiece tucked under her hair. Every few minutes, the host would explain how to fix this part or tune that belt, and Rosa would nod as she scrubbed. In her childhood, her father had taught her the basics of car repair next to their old family sedan. She had helped him change spark plugs and learn wiring diagrams. Over the years, she studied mechanics in the same way she studied cleaning techniques, carefully. And completely, by the time the elevators began to hum with rushing workers, Rosa had finished the corridors on the third floor. She set her bucket down and carefully rinsed her mop head. In a minute or two, the hallway would fill with busy professionals, and she did not want to be in their way. She opened a window to let fresh air in, then wiped her hands on a towel. She smiled at her reflection, dusting a smudge of hair from her forehead. Even in her uniform, she held herself with quiet confidence. On the top floor, the corner office with its floor-to-ceiling windows belonged to Mr. Larson, the CEO. He arrived in a sleek black car every morning. From a distance, he looked calm. And in control, his suit was always neat. His shoes shined to a mirror finish. Yet when he stepped out of his car this morning, his jaw was tense. He checked his watch, frowned at his phone, and tapped his foot as he waited for an elevator. He hardly glanced at Rosa when she swept past him on her way to the maintenance stairs. To him, she was invisible. Just one of the staff that kept his building clean. The cleaning staff in that tower numbered only a few dozen, but they worked night and day to keep the place spotless. Rosa was one of the most experienced among them. She knew every corner, every stain, and every secret hiding spot, yet she never bragged. She smiled at colleagues, helped trainees learn the ropes, but otherwise kept her thoughts to herself. Her silent presence suited her. She took pride in work that few noticed, because she knew what it took to keep things in order. Meanwhile, Mr. Larson stepped into his office, sent a brief email, and glanced out at the city below. He loved the view and the reminder that his company occupied a position of power. For years, he had built his business into a respected brand. He had little time for people who did not fit into his high-speed world. Cleaners, assistants, and other support staff were part of the background. They did their jobs, and he did his. He assumed no one in the building could do more than what their title suggested. On the ground floor, in the loading area behind the tower, Rosa parked her mop bucket and opened the garage doors. Trucks came and went, delivering supplies. She swept the floor where footprints mixed with tire marks. That was when she saw Mr. Larson's luxury car rolling to a stop at the edge of the lot. He stepped out and cursed under his breath. A few security guards watched from a distance, but none approached. Rosa paused in her work to watch him. As his face was drawn and angry, even from where she stood, she could tell something was wrong. She leaned on her mop handle as the engine sputtered. A few drops of oil leaked onto the concrete. Rosa did not need to know much about cars to see that much. She remembered the mornings she spent with her father as a girl. She remembered how a car could be both stubborn and fragile. She remembered how good it felt to make an engine run smoothly again. She sighed and bent down to pick up a rag. But then she shook her head and put it back. It was not her car. was not her problem. Mr. Larson raised his voice and called for someone to bring a mechanic. A security guard came forward and offered to call a tow truck. Mr. Larson waved him away. He muttered something about being late for an important meeting. He tapped his watch again. The guard looked at Rosa. She stood with her bucket and mop as if she had not noticed. In truth, she had noticed everything. She had seen the way he treated the cleaning staff, the way he spoke as if they did not exist. She had no interest in standing around while he fumed. Inside, she took a deep breath and imagined herself under the hood of that car. She pictured the fuel lines, the filters, the belt that might be worn. She ran quick checklists in her mind as she swept the spilled oil. The guard returned with news that the tow truck would arrive in 30 minutes. Mr. Larson scowled and said the meeting would have to wait. Rosa straightened and walked toward her bucket as if to continue her cleaning. But then she paused again. No one expected her to know how to fix a car. In fact, most people assumed she never learned anything beyond wiping floors. She kept her skills secret because it gave her peace to have something of her own. She had no wish to show off or ask for praise. She just enjoyed understanding how things worked. Now, as the guard asked if she could move her bucket, she took an extra step and squatted beside the oil stain. She cleaned it up in a few strokes, her movements precise. Mr. Larson glanced over and saw her cleaning. He said sharply, "Move aside. This is no place for janitors." The guard looked embarrassed. Rosa looked up at Mr. Larson and held his gaze. Her eyes were calm, but there was quiet strength in them. She nodded, then rose and moved her bucket to the side. She gave him a faint smile. For a moment, everything was still. The car sat silent. The guard stood awkwardly, and the cleaning machine hummed softly in the background. Rosa took a few more steps forward, stopping just far enough to be noticed. She spoke in a low voice, polite but clear. She said, "Sir, it might help to check the fuel filter and the belt. Sometimes they clog or wear down." Her words floated in the air. No one expected such advice from a janitor. Mr. Larson's expression flickered between surprise and annoyance. He opened his mouth to speak, but then closed it. He did not know whether to ignore her or ask her to leave. Rosa stood quietly, mop in hand, ready to step back if asked. She had no plan to intervene further, lest he gave her reason to. Yet the thought of ignoring her own skill felt strange. She had fixed many things in her life. "I should have broken. Car be different?" The guard cleared his throat. He said, "I'll call the mechanic anyway." He lifted his phone. Mr. Larson waved his hand in dismissal and said, "Never mind. We'll wait." He looked at Rosa again and said, "Thank you for cleaning up. But this isn't your job." Rosa nodded, her face still calm. "I know," she said softly. "But if someone checks that part, it could save time." She pointed to the small puddle of oil. "It often starts there." Without waiting for an answer, she picked up her bucket and turned away. She went back to the service entrance, leaving Mr. Larson to his thoughts. As she walked down the hallway, her mop made a steady rhythm on the tile. She pushed the door open for the first elevator she saw and stepped inside. A few cleaners and delivery people got in with her, unspoke of what had happened. Above in the loading bay, Mr. Larson stared at the car, touched its hood gently, as if testing its strength. He looked toward the entrance where Rosa had vanished. He wondered how she knew about car parts. He wondered if he had been too quick to judge her. He tapped his watch again and sighed. The meeting could wait, he thought. He would find out soon enough whether the advice of a janitor held any value. At all. Only then would he learn how deep Rosa Jenkins's hidden skill truly ran. Rosa finished her morning route through the offices and was heading toward the loading bay. When she heard it, a rough cough of engine noise, a long pause, then a final shudder. She stopped in her tracks and turned. The open garage door. She saw Mr. Larson's sleek black car stall in the bright sunlight. He leaned out the window, face tight with impatience, and tapped the steering wheel. The car fell silent. A thin wisp of smoke curled from under the hood. A cluster of security guards and delivery drivers froze in place, unsure what to do next. Mr. Larson stepped out of the car, buttoning his suit jacket even as he glared at the engine. His eyes darted along the polished panels as if willing the car to obey. When it remained dead, he slammed his fist lightly against the side and muttered a sharp curse under his breath. A guard approached with a calm voice. "Sir, shall I call a mechanic?" The guard's tone was steady but wary, because Mr. Larson's temper was well known throughout the building. "No," Mr. Larson snapped. "Call your own uncle, but not me." He spun on his heel and crossed his arms. He looked up and down the loading bay as though expecting someone else to step forward. Rosa watched him silently from the shadows by the stacks of cleaning supplies. She held her mop catch in one hand and a rag in the other. In her uniform, she appeared to be deep in thought. No one else noticed her, but she noticed all of them. A young intern who had been unloading boxes peered curiously at the car and whispered to a coworker. The coworker shrugged. Neither moved. At that moment, Rosa realized that everyone assumed no one there had the skill to fix a modern engine. The building's maintenance team handled janitorial tasks and the delivery staff handled bookkeeping, but nobody thought to merge those roles. Mr. Larson certainly did not. He glanced over his shoulder at the gathering crowd and scowled. Rosa could almost hear his thoughts. Why is nobody moving? She knew those loud engines better than most of the drivers in the building. She remembered how she and her father had spent hours leaning over the hood of their old sedan, tools laid out neatly on the driveway. She remembered the quiet pride she felt when she turned the key and the engine sprang to life again. She valued that skill more than any paycheck she had ever earned. Mr. Larson sniffed and strode back to the car. He bent down to peer under the wheel well, then rose and snapped, "Anyone here think they can get it running? I'm not paying for a tow, let's say. Whoever fixes it can have it." His voice echoed off the concrete walls. The words "car's yours" hung in the air. Everyone around him stiffened, uncertain whether he was serious or simply trying to scare someone into action. A hush fell. The delivery drivers exchanged glances. One coughed. The security guard, who had offered help, cleared his throat and mumbled, "Sir, perhaps we should." He was cut off when Mr. Larson waved him away, face red with frustration. He tapped his watch again and said, "You've got 10 minutes. That engine runs. By then, congratulations, it's yours." Rosa felt a small flutter in her chest, but she did not move. She stood in the dim corridor where a single strip light hummed overhead. Her uniform had a small name tag, R. Jenkins. It was wrinkled from hours of work, but her mop and bucket were spotless after she had emptied and cleaned them. He looked back toward the open garage, then forward at the supply closet where her toolkit lay hidden behind boxes of paper towels. No one in that business world expected a janitor to know how to use tools beyond a broom. She allowed herself a wry smile. Of course they would not expect her. She had learned engines from her father, not at a classroom. Her skill was private, like a secret garden she tended alone. But now the challenge beckoned. She sensed that if she could make that car run, something would change about Mr. Larson, about the staff, about herself. She took a careful breath and pushed her mop bucket aside. It rolled on its casters with a soft creak. Rosa unhooked the lid of the supply closet and stepped inside. The smell of cleaning products was sharp in her nose, but she ignored it as she knelt by a cardboard box. Inside, carefully wrapped in a cloth, was her small set of wrenches, a few screwdrivers, and a voltmeter. She lifted them out and slipped them into the pockets of her pants. Outside, Mr. Larson glared at his watch. He muttered, 10 minutes indeed. Might take you longer to find someone who can do this." The security guard looked over, hopeful that a mechanic might appear. The driver shrugged again, clinging to the hope of a quick tow. No one knew that minutes away, behind a closet door, a janitor gathered her tools. Rosa carried the tools back into the light. She knelt by the car's front bumper, where a small puddle of oil told her that the fuel pump had leaked. She steadied herself and slid under the hood. Her gloves smelled of motor oil and cleaning agents, but she did not mind. With confident, practiced hands, she removed the air filter housing and checked the filter. It was clogged with dust. She nodded to herself and replaced it with a fresh one she had brought from home months ago and forgotten in her toolkit. Mr. Larson turned around when he heard a soft click of the hood latch. He frowned. No one was supposed to tamper with his car. He strode forward. Rosa paused mid-turn, wiping dirt from her glove on her pants. "Who are you?" he demanded sharply. His voice cracked with surprise. Rosa looked up at him. Her eyes were steady. "I'm Rosa Jenkins," she said quietly. "I clean this building. I also know a bit about cars." Her voice was calm but unwavering. She stood and removed her gloves, leaving grease on her uniform sleeves. The gathering crowd gasped, expecting her to turn and walk away. But Rosa stayed. "Your fuel filter was clogged, and your drive belt was loose," she continued. "That can make the engine stall. I tightened your belt and changed the filter." She pointed at the new part. Mr. Larson's mouth hung open. He looked from the label on the filter to her hands. She dropped to one knee again and tested the tension on the belt. It had the right give, not too tight, not too loose. With a satisfied nod, she closed the hood. She stepped back, bent to pick up her rag, and then straightened. Shaking slightly, she said, "Try it now." Mr. Larson hesitated. Then he inserted the key into the ignition. The engine turned over with a smooth purr, then settled into a steady idle. He stepped back, blinking at the car. It seemed to hum with satisfaction, as though relieved to be free of its fault. Mr. Larson looked at Rosa, his face a mix of confusion and respect. Rosa pocketed her tools and picked up her mop bucket. She angled her head at him and said, "You're welcome." Then she turned and walked away without looking back. Behind her, the cluster of staff erupted into whispered excitement. The security guard shook his head in wonder. The drivers stood silent, mouths open. Mr. Larson stood alone by his car, staring after Rosa's retreating figure. He felt a warmth he had never known before, a mix of shame for his earlier mockery and admiration for the janitor who had solved his problem. He patted the hood gently, as though thanking the car for its quick recovery, but in his mind he was thanking Rosa Jenkins. In that moment, he vowed he would never underestimate someone again, especially someone who quietly carried a world of knowledge behind a simple name tag. Rosa Jenkins finished her morning sweep in the lobby and paused by the marble fountain. She felt a quiet pride that she had helped Mr. Larson's car start again, even though no one knew it was her doing. She carried memories of oil and engines. Hidden beneath her janitor uniform, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the floor, and she set down her mop bucket, wiping her hands on a towel tucked at her waist. The fountain's gentle gurgle seemed to whisper encouragement. Rosa glanced around. The corridors were empty. This was her moment of peace before she slipped back into her secret world. She slid the side panel of her cleaning cart open and retrieved a small, battered rag. Tucked beneath it lay her father's favorite wrench, smooth, warm from years of use. She ran her fingertips along its handle, recalling the afternoons in her childhood when her father would teach her to loosen a bolt until it spun free. She closed her eyes and inhaled the faint scent of machine oil, feeling her heart beat a little faster. Then she tucked the wrench into her back pocket and continued to the service elevator. The elevator's doors hissed open on the basement level, where the scent of concrete and oil welcomed her. She switched on a small lamp she carried in her pocket, its lead beam slicing through the garage gloom. Rows of parked cars stood like sleeping beasts. Rosa carried her toolkit in a backpack strap snug against her shoulders. In it were her spark plug socket, a voltmeter, spare filters, a set of screwdrivers, and a compact socket wrench. She had hidden this kit behind stacks of paper towels and cleaning supply crates so that no one in the janitorial team would suspect her mechanical interest. She unlocked the service door with a small key she kept on a lanyard. The click echoed in the silent space. She knelt beside Mr. Larson's black sedan, its hood still carrying warmth from the morning run. She reached out and touched the edge of the hood, remembering the precise way her fingers fit into every groove of her own father's old car. He had shown her how to listen to an engine's heartbeat through its vibrations. Rosa took a deep breath and lifted the hood, propping it open with the metal rod. First, she tested the battery's voltage. The voltmeter beeped a steady reading, so she knew the battery was fine. Next, she traced the wires leading to the fuel pump relay. The lack of voltage there matched the sputter it had shown that day. She located the relay under a clear plastic cover and gently removed it. Pins were dulled by dust and wear. She cleaned them with a fine brush and sprayed a drop of electrical contact cleaner, then replaced the relay, ensuring it clicked firmly into place. She moved to the air intake system. With a small screwdriver, she loosened the clamps on the intake hose and removed the throttle body cover. Carbon had built up on the butterfly valve, narrowing its opening. She sprayed cleaner and wiped patiently until the valve moved freely. Her gloved hand felt the smooth metal as she worked. She imagined the engine breathing more easily now, like a person taking deep, clear breaths. Rosa tested the fuel filter next. She located it between the fuel tank and the engine, a cylindrical canister held by a simple clip. She clicked the clip open, careful not to spill fuel, and lifted the old filter out. She held it up to the lamp and saw dark streaks where fuel had struggled to pass. She replaced it with a filter she had stashed in her kit weeks ago. It fit snugly. She clipped. The housing closed and ran her finger along the seam to confirm it was secure. Gloves smelled of gasoline and sweat, but she did not mind. She worked methodically, like a painter on a canvas. Every movement was smooth and confident. She could almost hear her father's voice. Treat the engine like a body. It speaks if you know how to listen. She straightened the spark plug. Wires then removed one plug at a time to inspect each electrode. They were worn and slightly fouled. She cleaned them with a wire brush, checked the gap with a gauge, and adjusted it until it matched the small diagram stamped on the engine block. While she worked, she thought of her friend Mrs. Khan, who ran the corner cafe. Mrs. Khan often teased Rosa about being a jack of all trades. You clean, you cook, you fix bikes, she would laugh. What can't you do? Rosa had never told her friend about the toolkit hidden in her closet at home. It felt good to keep that surprise tucked away, just as it felt good now to bring her skill to life in this silent garage. With the major fixes complete, she tightened the serpentine belt next. A small fray near the water pump pulley had made it slack. A loose belt could slip under load and stall the engine. She used her socket wrench to release the tensioner, slid the new belt into place, then allowed the tensioner to clamp it firmly. She gave it a firm tug to confirm the right amount of give. It held perfectly. Rosa wiped her brow and surveyed her work. The engine looked clean, every part in place. She closed the hood with a gentle clap and stepped back. Her heart pounded. With quiet triumph, she pressed the key into the ignition. The engine turned over with a deep roar, then settled into a smooth, confident purr. She let it run a moment, listening to the even tone. A well-tuned engine, she thought, sang like a choir. She reached into her backpack and retrieved a small notebook. In neat handwriting, she jotted, relays cleaned, filter replaced, spark plugs gapped, belt tensioned, throttle cleaned. Under each note, she added a check mark. Then she wrote a second note, proposed small engine clinic for staff. She closed the notebook, imagining a small weekly workshop where she could teach the basics of car care to curious friends like Mrs. Khan or interested security guards. She dared to dream that one day the building's maintenance team might seek her out for advice. She packed her tools, wiping each with a cloth before slipping them back into their slots. Every screwdriver clicked into place. Her wrench lay flat, waiting for its next turn. She wrapped the kit in its cloth, closed the backpack, and locked the service door behind her. As she climbed the stairs to the lobby, the parking lot lights flickered on, casting long beams across the asphalt. Back in the break room, Rosa poured herself a cup of hot tea. She sipped it slowly, enjoying the warmth as it spread down her throat. She glanced at her reflection in the small window. She wore a uniform and carried cleaning supplies, but she carried engines in her mind. She thought again of Mr. Larson's astonished face when the car purred to life. She hoped he would remember that moment and treat others with more respect in future. Her phone buzzed with a message from her younger brother, asking for help fixing his old motorcycle. She smiled and typed back, "I'm free this Saturday." She felt a glow of happiness. Teaching him had always felt right. She loved sharing her father's lessons. It made her feel connected to him even though he had been gone for years. The building emptied and lights dimmed, but Rosa stayed at her table until the tea was gone. She folded her notebook and slid it into her pocket, next to the wrench. She left the break room and returned to her final cleaning duty, dusting the entrance mats so they looked fresh for the morning. She worked slowly, savoring each moment. She felt alive in a way she never had before. Inside her uniform, she was more than a janitor. She was a keeper of hidden talents. When her shift ended, she carried her empty bucket to the storage closet. She waved to the night guard at the gate. He nodded politely, unaware of her second life. She walked home under the street lamps, her backpack light but her heart full. She thought of tomorrow's sunrise and the chance to hide her skills once more. Yet she also looked forward to the day when she might share them openly, teaching those who believed a uniform defined a person's worth. At home, she entered her small apartment and set her backpack by the door. She changed into jeans and a soft sweater, then sat at her kitchen table. She opened her notebook and drew a simple diagram of an engine, labeling each part she had cleaned today. She wrote a list of tools she needed for the next small repair. She planned to visit the local community college this week to ask about evening classes in automotive technology. A shy hope bloomed in her chest. Maybe one day she could become a certified mechanic. She closed the notebook and stood to stretch. The quiet of her apartment felt like a warm blanket. She placed the wrench on the table, clean and ready for tomorrow. She thought of how far she had come from that first rainy day under her father's workshop to this night. Planning her future. She felt proud, peaceful, and safe in her hidden world of engines. She turned off the light, climbed into bed, and drifted into dreams of open roads, engine purrs, and possibilities as limitless as the sky. Rosa Jenkins arrived early the next morning, as usual, carrying her mop and bucket through the quiet lobby. The marble floor still gleamed from the night cleaning. She paused by the elevators, glancing at her watch. But soon, the building would come to life. She set down her bucket, wiped her hands on her towel, and stretched her back. It felt good to breathe the cool morning air. Today, though, she felt a gentle excitement beneath her calm. She knew Mr. Larson would arrive soon, but she did not guess what awaited her. A few minutes later, she heard the familiar hum of his luxury car pulling up outside. She watched from the glass doors as he stepped out of the sedan, dressed sharply in his tailored suit. He carried a leather briefcase and tapped his watch. His expression was serious, but in his eyes, she thought she saw curiosity. He looked toward the loading bay, then back at the entrance, as if expecting someone to call his name. Rosa remained still, mop in hand. To her surprise, Mr. Larson walked straight toward her instead of the garage. Rosa froze for an instant, surprised by his directness. She stood tall, heart fluttering, and offered a polite nod. He paused in front of her, briefcase in hand, and studied her face. The morning sun shone through the glass, casting light on her uniform. He took a breath, then spoke in a measured tone that lacked his usual sharp edge. "Miss Jenkins," he said, using her full name. "Can we talk?" Rosa's throat felt dry. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and nodded. She set down her mop bucket and followed him down the corridor toward the CEO's office. Colleagues working at their desks paused to watch, whispering. The word spread quickly. The CEO wants to see the janitor. Rosa maintained her composure, though her mind raced. She wondered whether he would apologize or reprimand her. Either way, she would meet him with honesty. They entered the glass-walled office on the top floor. The city's skyline stretched behind his large desk. Mr. Larson closed the door and gestured toward a pair of chairs. Rosa sat, placing her mop bucket beside her. She folded her hands in her lap and looked at him with calm attention. He straightened his tie and leaned forward, clasping his hands on the desk. He cleared his throat. The silence stretched until he finally spoke. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "Yesterday I spoke to you without respect. I mocked you in front of everyone. That was wrong." Rosa's chest tightened. She lowered her gaze but did not shift or turn away. She felt a warmth in her cheeks but held back a reply until he finished. "I judged you by your title and uniform," he continued. "I assumed you could only sweep floors and empty trash. I was arrogant and unkind." Rosa lifted her head and met his eyes. She noticed a flicker of regret in them. She nodded softly. "Thank you, sir," she said, Her voice was gentle but steady. "Appreciate your words." She paused, then added, "I have always done my best. And yesterday, I simply used my other skill." Mr. Larson leaned back and ran a hand over his face, as though smoothing away his own doubt. It was stunned her a small smile. "I was stunned," he admitted. "I never expected a janitor to know so much about car engines. You fixed my car faster and better than any mechanic I could have hired." He paused, searching for the right words. "You humbled me. I want to make amends and also show that I value what you can do." He stood and walked to a bookshelf. Pulling out a small stack of papers, he returned to the desk and placed them before her. "I've prepared a contract," he said. "I would like to hire you as a consultant for our maintenance team." Rosa's eyes widened in surprise. She leaned forward and picked up the top sheet, reading the heading, "Independent Mechanical Consultant, Larson Enterprises." The contract offered her flexible hours and fair pay to lead training sessions on equipment maintenance and basic mechanical skills. It even offered to cover the cost of formal certification classes. Rosa's mind swirled. She never imagined her secret passion would become a paid role. She laid down the papers and looked up at Mr. Larson. "Thank you, sir," she said again, voice steady. "This means a lot." She hesitated, then added, "But I have another idea." He raised an eyebrow. "Would like to hold workshops for anyone who wants to learn. Security guards, cleaners, receptionists, anyone curious about basic engine care." She paused. "Not everyone can sign a formal contract, but everyone can learn a skill." Mr. Larson regarded her thoughtfully, then nodded. "I like that idea," he said. "We'll schedule monthly sessions in our garage. We'll have the AE maintenance team assist you. Let's call them Rosa's engine clinics." They shake hands over the desk. Rosa felt a thrill of pride. This partnership felt right beyond her wildest dreams. Over the next hour, they worked out details. Mr. Larson asked her preferences, morning or afternoon sessions, class size, materials needed. Rosa suggested simple handouts and hands-on demonstrations, maybe even field trips to local auto shops. He agreed and promised to market the sessions internally through emails and flyers. He even teased that he might attend the first clinic himself. Rosa laughed softly at the thought of the CEO in overalls. When their meeting ended, Rosa gathered her mop bucket and the signed contract. She thanked him again and left his office with surprising lightness in her step. Colleagues peeked out, faces bright with congratulations. Rosa offered quiet smiles and nods. She returned to her cleaning tasks. But her mind danced with plans for the first clinic. That afternoon, in the basement garage, she organized her tool rolls and cleaned the workbenches.
The maintenance crew wielded folding chairs at her request.
She taped blank sheets of paper to the concrete wall and titled them Rosa's Engine Clinic, Lesson 1, Fuel Systems. She arranged spare parts on a low table, filters, spark plugs, belts. She felt a thrill of anticipation. She never imagined that teaching others would feel so right. The next morning, she climbed into the service elevator with a notepad and pen, dressed in her uniform but carrying a spare pair of mechanic's gloves. She stepped out to find a small group gathered, 2 security guards in crisp uniforms, a receptionist clutching a cup of coffee, a delivery driver wearing a reflective vest. Meant to her surprise, Mr. Larson stood near the car, wearing jeans and a rolled-up shirt sleeve, ready to learn. Smiles and quiet hellos passed between them. Rosa took a deep breath and began. She spoke in her calm, clear voice, explaining how a fuel pump works and why filters must stay clean. She showed them the clogged filter before and the clean one after. She invited them to feel the resistance on a belt and compare it to the fresh belt beside it. She guided hands gently, encouraging questions. The group listened, leaning forward with genuine interest. Even Mr. Larson knelt beside her, eyes bright as the clinic continued. She felt a warm glow. She glanced at the group's faces, curiosity, respect, gratitude. They treated her not as a janitor, but as a teacher and expert. In that moment, Rosa realized that respect comes when we share our true selves and help others grow. The simple act of teaching transformed everyone's view. She smiled, knowing that hiding her talent had been necessary once, but that now it was time to shine. By the end of the morning, the group applauded her. Mr. Larson shook her hand firmly. "Thank you, Rosa," he said, voice sincere. "You've changed this company." Rosa nodded, feeling her heart full. She looked at the rising sun through the garage skylight and whispered quietly to herself, "This is only the beginning." And she meant it, for both her and everyone who dared to. Learn from the woman who once passed unseen behind a mop. The first light of dawn warmed the windows of the office tower as Rosa Jenkins slipped into the basement garage for her final clinic of the month. She carried her folder of lesson notes and a small box of spare parts she had gathered from the maintenance shop. The garage smelled faintly of oil and rubber, but to Rosa, it felt welcoming and alive. Chairs stood in a half circle around the car she would use as a teaching Tula, sleek black sedan now purring smoothly, thanks to her care. A half-dozen employees waited quietly, a security guard, 2 receptionists, a delivery driver, and, to her surprise, Mr. Larson himself. Dressed casually and leaning against the hood with genuine interest in his eyes, Rosa smiled at the small group and set her materials on a low workbench. She always began her clinics by asking what questions people had so she could tailor each session to their curiosity. Today, the security guard wanted to know how to check oil levels. One receptionist wondered about tire pressure. Mr. Larson asked if there was a simple way to detect early signs of engine wear. Rosa listened carefully, then showed them each step: how to find the dipstick, how clean oil should look, where to find the tire pressure sticker on the door jamb, and how to tap the hood to listen for loose parts. She guided their fingers on a pressure gauge and let Mr. Larson compare the sound of cold metal with warm metal. Each face lit with understanding as they made connections between theory and action by the time sunlight filtered through the skylights. The group had learned more than just mechanics. They had learned that knowledge could come from unexpected places. The security guard shook Rosa's hand and said, "Thank you, Rosa. I never thought I would enjoy this." The receptionist added, "I'm going to tell my family I can fix my own car." Mr. Larson looked at her with a quieter pride than she had ever seen on his face. "This was excellent," he said softly. "You've opened my eyes to what people can do when you give them a chance." Word of Rosa's clinic spread beyond the tower's walls. A local business newsletter ran a small article about the janitor, who teaches mechanics, complete with a photo of her demonstrating spark plug gaps. Neighbors at the corner cafe greeted her with waves, asking when the next free session would be. Mrs. Khan, the cafe owner and Rosa's longtime friend, built a small display at her counter with flyers announcing Rosa's community car care class. Rosa blushed when she saw it, but felt a swell of gratitude that her secret talent was helping so many. She offered to teach the cafe staff how to maintain the espresso machine, and Mrs. Khan smiled. "You never cease to amaze me." Inside the company, the atmosphere shifted gently but surely. Managers who once passed Rosa without a glance now stopped to say good morning. The maintenance team invited her suggestions during equipment checks. Even upstairs in the executive suite, Mr. Larson asked if she had any ideas to improve the company's fleet reliability. He had her name added to the contractor list, so her work could be officially recorded. With each respectful nod or greeting, Rosa felt her shoulders relax a little more. She carried no bitterness over past slights, only hope for what came next. One afternoon, the building management team invited her to speak at a small event in the lobby. Banners read, "Celebrating Hidden Talents." She stood before a crowd of cleaners, security officers, administrative staff, and executives. She spoke in her calm, clear voice about her father's lessons, about how curiosity and kindness could take you far, and about why she believed everyone deserved a chance to learn something new. She did not mention her own doubts or the fear she once felt. Instead, she focused on the moment, how sharing knowledge with others had changed her life and theirs. After her speech, colleagues lined up to thank her. A young intern said, "I want to study engineering now." A receptionist admitted she had dismissed the cleaning staff before, but now she saw each person as someone with a story. Mr. Larson approached and shook her hand in front of everyone, saying, "Rosa, you have made us all better." The applause that followed felt like a tide lifting her gently. She smiled and felt tears gather, but she blinked them back, tears of joy, not pain. Outside work, Rosa's story inspired her neighbors too. She organized a weekend class at the community center for members of her neighborhood who could not travel downtown. There, she showed elderly drivers how to check tire tread and how to clean battery terminals. She coached young parents on choosing the right motor oil for winter weather. Attendance grew each week until the small classroom overflowed. Rosa adjusted her lesson plans, bringing simple diagrams on poster boards and marking up parts with bright stickers. She encouraged her students to ask questions and to trust their own hands. At each clap of thank you, her heart fluttered like it did long ago, when she first turned the key of her father's car and watched it roar to life. Her family celebrated her success too. Her younger brother, a budding mechanic himself, visited often to learn advanced techniques. He and Rosa spent Saturday mornings under the hood of his old motorcycle, twisting sockets and testing carburetors. They joked like children, and for Rosa, it felt like reclaiming a piece of her childhood. Her mother, who lived in the countryside, called to say how proud she was that Rosa's passion had turned into something that helped so many people. Her parents' praise wrapped around her like a warm blanket, comforting her in ways her professional achievements never could. Back at the office tower, the monthly clinics became a fixture. Employees scheduled time to drop by, curious to learn something new, or simply to say hello. The maintenance team, once cold and distant, now collaborated with Rosa on small repairs throughout the building. They tackled squeaky door hinges, ant-infested, vacuum hoses, and flickering light fixtures, treating each problem as a lesson. Even the parking lot gates received her attention. She showed the gatekeeper how to clear debris and lubricate the chains to prevent jams. Every challenge became an opportunity for shared knowledge. Rosa began to dream bigger. She enrolled in an evening certificate program in automotive technology at the local college. She wanted to strengthen her foundation and gain formal credentials. The college administration offered her a partial scholarship once they heard her story. She studied textbooks on fuel injection and electrical systems alongside classmates half her age. She asked questions freely, her voice confident. She joined a student club that rebuilt vintage engines, and she mentored new members on practical troubleshooting. Her classmates respected her experience, and she felt a sense of belonging she had never known in the janitor's closet. Within a year, Rochelle earned her certification and was offered a part-time position at a nearby garage. She balanced that work with her janitor duties until she felt ready to choose between them. The company she had helped offered her a full-time role as a consultant and trainer. She weighed her options carefully. She loved the tower and the community she had built there, but she also yearned for the hands-on work of a garage floor. In the end, she accepted the consulting role. With part-time garage work, two worlds she had always dreamed of bridging. On her last day as a janitor in the tower, Rosa carried her uniform and mop bucket to her locker one final time. She paused. At the cleaning supply closet, running her fingers over the toolkits she had once hidden there, she closed the door softly, as if saying goodbye to an old friend. She walked through the halls with her head held high, and employees of every rank smiled and waved. Mr. Larson met her at the entrance, holding a bouquet of flowers and a small plaque that read in honor of Rosa Jenkins, Champion of Hidden Talent. He shook her hand and said, "Thank you for everything you have given us." Rosa felt her eyes fill as she accepted the gift. Outside, the city lights danced on the wet pavement after a brief rain. Rosa walked to the garage where her new employer waited. She had a fresh box of gloves and a list of engine rebuilds to guide. She felt the familiar pulse of possibility in her veins. The world had changed around her because she dared to share a hidden skill. She had taught others, and they had taught her about respect, community, and courage. She stepped into the garage and closed the door behind her, ready for the next spark of engine and life alike. And so Rosa Jenkins, once a janitor who carried secret dreams beneath her uniform, became a respected mechanic and teacher. She never forgot the mop and bucket that first carried her courage to speak up. She never forgot the tall office tower or the moment her advice surprised its proudest occupant. She never forgot her father's gentle guidance under his old family sedan. But most of all, She remembered that every person carries hidden talents and that all it takes is a chance and a kind word to let those talents shine.